an answer to the question of what is enlightenment. What is enlightenment? It's an essay by one of the greatest thinkers of all times, Immanuel Kant, who was a German philosopher who lived between 1724 to 1804. Writing during the age of Enlightenment, Immanuel Kant tried to answer the prevailing question that was being raised around his society, in the society, that is, what is enlightenment? And in this essay, he tried to do just that. Before we go and talk about the essay and what Kant tried to expound his ideas upon it, it would be worthwhile to have a brief understanding of what this age of enlightenment was. The age of enlightenment was an intellectual movement that consists of some poets, musicians, writers, playwrights, artists, who, while they had different opinions and beliefs about what this enlightenment stood for, they all share this common cause, which was the use of reason, and make it as the measuring rod for all beliefs. In other words, reason became the measure of all things. Reason became the measure of all things. The place which had hitherto been given to revelation reason was going to take the place of it, and due to this skeptical or insistent use of reason, this age of enlightenment, which was an which took place during the 18th century, new ideas got emerged in the Western societies, which shaped the world that we have inherited in the modern world. The reason I took this essay and want to have a summary of the ideas that Kant expounded in his essay is that our age scenes where ideas have lost the inspiring power to inspire people to live life to the full. To the full. And I desire that we can take some inspiration from the thinkers of enlightenment, so that we can have a fresh look at things and have a new vision of the world that could bring life to life again. So let us begin the essay now and see what Kant tried to say in it. Kant described enlightenment as enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-incurred immaturity. And by self-incurred, he means which is not the lack of understanding, not the lack of understanding, but the lack of courage to use one's understanding unaided. And by immaturity he means to use one's reason without the guidance of another. So, for him, the motto of the Enlightenment becomes sapere aude. Is a German word, German sentence which means dare to think. Dare to think. Having defined what enlightenment is, Kant in the next para gives a reason as to why people do not reach the age, do not become enlightened. And the reason he gives is that it is too convenient or easy to be immature. And by immature, like we said, means to not be able to use one's reason without unaided, without the guidance of something else. So he says it is too easy, because if, for example, if I have a book that would tell me about, that would tell me or make me understand about something, I won't use my own reason unaided to try to understand things on my own. Or if I have a spiritual leader who would have the conscience for me, that means he would take the courage to go through the spiritual journey while I would simply be leading him. I won't on my own have the spiritual journey on my own. And then he gives another example of a doctor. If I were a doctor to judge what diet I should have, I wouldn't need the need to find out things on my own as to what is good for me. And so all people need to do is pay. They can pay the spiritual leader, they can pay and buy a book, they can pay and go and see a doctor. So it becomes too convenient for people to just be immature, that is, not to use one's reason without the help of others. And these and then the society becomes divided into two classes. One are those who act as guardians, and those whom the people who follow or obey their orders. And the people become the domesticated, docile creatures for these guardians, who take upon themselves the duty to guide the people. And what the guardians do is that they won't allow the people to take a single step on their own. Just like a parent who holds the hand of the child, these guardians similarly will keep their strings attached to the people. And they will inculcate a fear, among the people, that if they were to try and take a step on their own, there would be a great danger that would beset them. So the people, fearing that they would harm themselves, decide not to come out of this immaturity, which is the inability to use one's reason on their own without the guidance of something else. And this being this dependency of people on their guardians makes their immaturity their second nature. They would get too used to follow others rather than becoming the becoming the guidance for them for their own selves. And Kant says that even if people try to walk on their own, since they have so got used to being immature, the formulas and the dogmas, the beliefs, which are the beliefs that people have come to accept because someone else told them to that those beliefs are true, without they themselves finding out that these beliefs are true or not, become the formulas and dogmas of their mind or reason, which they use to move their to move or to act, to move or to act in the world. And they lose the natural capacity of the reason natural capacity of the reason to walk unaided, and the flexibility gets lost, and Kant describes these formulas and dogmas to be too mechanical and not natural. That if someone were to find a trench before them, that he decides to walk unaided, he wouldn't be able to jump over that trench, since the reason has become too mechanical with the dogmas and formulas that they have been indoctrinated with. So Kant concludes in that para that only a few hence are able to develop the courage to use reason unaided. Having done that, Kant then moves to discuss public enlightenment. He says there is more chance of public enlightenment, but the only thing that is needed is need to be people need to be left on their own, or they must be given the freedom to be as they want to. And he says that among the guardians, it's possible that when this freedom is given in the society, some people, a few of the guardians might throw off the yoke of immaturity and develop enlightenment, and then they might pass on this spirit of enlightenment to the rest of the people. And if these guardians don't do that, even when the guardians stir up the passions among the people to make them free from some foreign rule or some autocratic power, the change in power from foreign rule to the rule of the people won't bring any significant change, since this would simply replace one prejudice with another. So it is very imperative that the guardians, before they decide to lead the people to freedom, they should themselves develop the courage to use their reason on their own. So Kant says that all we need is freedom to make public use of reason. But everywhere we can see there are restrictions as to that. He says there are cries of don't argue, obey. Don't argue, get on parade. Don't argue, but believe. These cries can be heard everywhere. So Kant, from here on, develops his idea of public use of reason and private use of reason. By public use of reason, he means that a man of learning should be able to express his ideas without any restrictions to the public. While as the private use of reason simply means the use of reason while being in an office or holding some office. And Kant argues that in this case, there should not be any restrictions at all, while in this case, we can have some reasonable restrictions. So what Kant is trying to get to is that uh, for the smooth functioning of the commonwealth or the polity or the state, um, uh, for the smooth functioning of the machinery of the commonwealth, uh, 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 it seems reasonable that um, the people who are part of this machinery of the state, rather than argue and reason about the orders that they receive from their higher ups, they should simply obey them. But at the same time, if a man is simply not only a man who holds the office, but is also a man of conscience who belongs to the society, and as such, if he feels like he should entertain his doubts or express his doubts or criticism of the prevailing order, he should be given the free rein to do that. Then onwards, Kant lays his emphasis on the freedom of public use of reason on as to the matters of religious doctrines. And he asks the question, should not a society of clergymen declare once and for all a set of doctrines which would be binding for all times to come? And his answer is emphatic no. He says any contract that would set in stone doctrines and beliefs for all times is against human nature, which desires progress and an understanding. He argues that while for a certain duration of time we can have certain beliefs and doctrines which the public ought to obey without refusing to obey them, by the public use of reasoning, we might come the certain inconsistencies and shortcomings of the present beliefs that prevail in the society might come forth, and we might develop a new public consensus might be developed, and the ideas and the beliefs and the doctrines that rise by this new public consensus can then become the new order of the society. So Kant, rather than arguing for a revolutionary change, is asking for incremental or reformative change in the society. Then Kant comes to the question of, do we live in an enlightened age? He answers that no, we do not live in an enlightened age, since most of the men have not yet developed the courage to use their power of reasoning unaided. But on the other hand, we can say that we live in the age of enlightenment, since much of the restrictions upon the public use of reason, he sees are slowly being lifted across the Western states. Kant then takes up the question of why his emphasis has been mostly on that why his emphasis on the public use of reasoning on religious doctrines, and he gives his two reasons. That firstly, religious doctrines are seen to that restrictions on discussing or the criticism of religious doctrines is something that the rulers in a society do not entertain, and and the second reason he gives is that since religious doctrines are the doctrines by which people live their lives, the immaturity in holding them is the most harmful, and hence the free restriction in the public use of reason or religious doctrines is vital. And towards the end of the essay, Kant gives an ideal picture of a ruler who ought to rule the state. And he says that an enlightened ruler would be one who, while being himself enlightened and has a strong and powerful army at his disposal to maintain the social order, public order, will declare, argue as much as you want, but obey. And then Kant, while ending the essay, says something very paradoxical, and I quote him, that while civil freedom seems advantageous to intellectual freedom, yet it also sets up insuperable barriers to it. This reminds me of something that Kierkegaard has famously said in one of his aphorisms. And I quote, people demand freedom of speech as a compensation for freedom of thought, which they seldom use. So what Kant is saying is that while there is enough freedom or freedom of speech, people won't value the freedom of thought, because they would think that simply having a freedom of speech, they are free. And then Kant says, ends the essay by saying that eventually, when the spirit of enlightenment becomes the order of the day and it spreads in the society, those who are in power, or those who rule over the people, will realize that their own profit lies in treating their subjects not as machines, but with human dignity. Human dignity.